a way to import data from Excel into QuickBooks using a feature called Batch Enter Transactions. I am actually going to download the bank information from Chase. This is the information I downloaded from the bank. Debits, credits, deposits, withdrawals. All this information is the activity from my actual bank in 2014, sorry. There's actually 1,200 transactions, and I want to show you how fast it is to bring in all this information to the bank. First, I want to show you how to clean up the data before we import it. There's a couple of obvious things here on this Excel file that we don't need. One of them is this last piece of information here called the CCD ID. A lot of the banks include in their transaction imports the merchant ID. We don't need this information. This information is duplicate for all we care. So what I'll do is I'm going to copy this here. I'll select it and copy it. And my goal is to grab the CCD ID and then this following 10 characters from every single transaction where it shows that. I'm going to select the entire column. I'm going to click Control F, which is the find function. I'll click on replace and I'll go ahead and paste that information. If I actually leave this as is and then click on replace all, this is only going to find the ones that have this specific characters. However, if I replace these characters here with question marks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the system will know that any character filling this spot is going to be replaced. So by putting this and replace with a blank, when I click on replace all of those endings with CCD and those 10 characters will go away. So I'm going to click on replace all. You should be able to see how a lot of these transactions are cleaned up now. Now the same thing happens with some of them that have web ID and some of them have PPD. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. So I'll put here web ID, hit replace all, and then I'm going to go to PPD and replace all. So just for some context, this is actually not a QuickBooks technique. This is an Excel technique, and I'm trying to just clean it up to make it easier to import when I'm bringing it in. Okay, that was one of the things we can clean up. The other piece of information I can clean up that I see come in quite often is, for example, all these digits here. Okay, this is probably my merchant ID number or something like that. So I'm going to select that. I'll put it on the find and then replace all, leave it blank. I'll click on replace all. There you go. So my transactions got cleaned a little bit further. Okay. I could probably keep going and look for more things and more patterns that are extra, but I think so far so good. I'll close that. The other thing that I do here is I'll create another column for my memos, and I need to limit the amount of characters that are going to go in this column to 41 characters, because in QuickBooks the maximum amount of characters a customer or a vendor could have is 41. So I'm going to hit equals. I'm going to select the memo field, and then I'm going to say left, and then I'll put comma 41. And what this formula does, this is basically left D2, which is the cell, and then 41 is the limit to the first 41 characters. I'll press enter, and what this will do as I'll copy this down, this will limit only to the first 41 characters, allowing for that import to be limited. So some of these things are going to be shortened or truncated, which is okay. So this is basically my new payee field. And then I'll leave the memo field intact because this is the original data that came from the bank. This information I don't want to mess with. This is my new payee field. This is my memo field. I like to have them duplicate like this, just in case I change the payee name in QuickBooks. I also like to have the original memo exactly as the bank had it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this and go to the next step. The next step is I need to separate or split my deposits with my withdrawals, or my debits from my credits. It's actually quite simple. So what I'll do is I'll select all of these here, and then I'll sort by the amount. That way automatically I'm going to get sort of in the top, I'm going to get everything that has a negative sign or that it's a withdrawal or a debit. And then all the way in the bottom, I'm going to get all the deposits. And then I'll just simply grab this information here and copy all the way down to when the sign changes. Okay, I will cut this, and in a new tab, which I'll call debits, I will paste this data. Perfect. When I come into my original table here, I'll delete these blank fields because I don't need them anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and copy the headers. That way I have clean headers in the top. Perfect. I'll expand this to make this a little bit easier to see. I can even resort them by date, which is sort of the natural way we want to see it. So I'm going to resort it by date. Okay, these are all my debits. And then remaining on my original tab is going to be all my credits. I'll resort that also to the date. I don't need to resort it by date, but it would be a kind of a natural way of seeing it. So what I'm seeing here is I have one tab for all my bank credits, and then another tab for all my bank debits. Okay, so from here, I have to make sure that I also remove the dollar sign. Okay, QuickBooks doesn't really work too well with dollar signs, so I'm going to put this back to just number, and then this will work like this. The next step is to grab all these payees here. So I'm going to select all the payees all the way down to the last one. And I'm going to come into QuickBooks, and I'm going to create all those payees as vendors. Well, in this case, actually, let me see, these are credits. Okay, so all these, I'll select all these as customers because this is deposits coming in. So all these will come in as customers. So I'm going to go into list, add edit multiple, and then I'll go to customers, and I'll basically just paste them all in there. Now, because it's limited to 41 characters, I am not going to get any errors about number of characters. However, when I save it, it's not going to save any duplicates. So anything that's a duplicate will come in as an error, but either way, whatever wasn't a duplicate will come in there. So I'll show you, I'm going to go into the customer center, and then there's all my quote-unquote customers. Now, obviously, these are not real customers. This is just what we brought in as QuickBooks as customers because we're importing the data. Let's do the same thing with the vendors. So we go to our debits. I'll select all of my payees. Go back into QuickBooks. Vendor center. I have no vendors. List, add edit multiple. Same exact technique. I'll switch it here to vendors, and I'll paste. When I hit save, same thing will happen. Everything that's new will save over. Everything that's potentially a duplicate will not. There we go. So now we have a whole bunch of vendors in here. Okay, so I'll close that, and I'll close that. Then I'm going to go into the accountant menu and go to batch enter transactions, and I'll start with my checks, which will be my bank debits. Go back into my Excel file, and I have to take a look at the configuration of these columns. So I have to make sure that in QuickBooks my columns match my spreadsheet. So I have type, which I don't need in QuickBooks at all, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. Then I'm going to see post date. There's my date, that's okay. Then my reference number, that's all right. Memo, that's good. Payee and amount. I have to make sure that I don't have any dollar signs or anything like that. Also, negative signs are not going to, QuickBooks is not going to understand either. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply all these by -1, which is going to turn them into positive. I'll copy that down, and I'll just go ahead and replace what was there with the new values. delete that extra column. Now I can bring it in. So date, reference number, memo, payee, amount. Go back into my QuickBooks, and I have to make sure these columns match. So it's going to be date, reference number, then I have to move memo up, payee, and then amount. And the last one is account, which I cannot remove. Account needs to be there. So I hit OK. OK, so I will select all of my data from Excel all the way down to the end. I'll hit copy or right click copy, either one works. Go back into QuickBooks, go to the top left cell and hit Control V or right click paste, either one works. All the data will come in there. All these vendors come out red just because of the amount that we're pasting, but all of these vendors are going to come in no problem because earlier we imported them using the Add Edit tool. So basically I'm just hitting the down arrow to allow QuickBooks just to reread and refresh it and to know that all these vendors are already in the vendor list. So I'll just wait a couple seconds or so as I'm holding the down arrow and allowing the system just to refresh and read the list and make sure that everything that I pasted in there is an actual real vendor. Now remember, these are 1,200 transactions, so this is actually much better than doing manual data entry. Okay, when I have no reds there, my next step is to make sure that I select an account. Now, if you want at this point, you can sit there and actually look at every one of these and give it a category. However, at this point, what I'll do is I just create one account called expense. And I'll show you later on with a different technique how I'm going to reclassify these. So just creating one account called expense, hit save and close, and then I'll right click and hit copy down. By doing that, every single transaction is going to go to the same expense account. I'll go to save transactions, hit yes, and that will take care of the first half, which is just the checks. Great, we're halfway done. Let's go over to debits, or sorry, credits, deposits. We're going to go switch into our Excel file, switch into our other tab that only contains deposits. We'll do the exact same thing. Start from post date, go all the way down to the very last transaction. And I'll hit copy. And then back into QuickBooks. And I have to make sure the column configuration matches Excel. So in Excel is date, reference number, memo, payee, amount. So in QuickBooks I have to make sure it's the same. So we'll click on customize columns. And then we got date. Then we have reference number, which in this case is not even available. So we'll just here this thing here called check number, which doesn't really matter for deposits. So we'll put that in there. Next one was memo, so we'll bring that up. And then it was a payee, which received from will be payee. And then we have amount. And this account from would be our account category. So we'll hit OK. Then we'll go to the top cell, paste. Perfect. And then down here where it says account from, we're going to put just an account called income. So just kind of simplifying this by putting it into a single account called income. Right click, copy down, and then I'll hit save transactions. Great. Now we're finished entering the data. So let me show you what that looks like. Reports, company financial, profit and loss standard, dates, last fiscal year. Basically, in a nutshell, I have all my income in one major category, all my expenses in another major category, and then my net income. Now, this is not complete by far. However, when I go to reconcile the banking, reconcile, and I actually go through my reconciliation process, I should just be able to put my actual ending balance there, whatever it is. In this particular case, is the one I'm looking in the screen. But you would actually take the actual ending balance from the statement. So you take the actual ending balance from the statement. You basically click mark all, and automatically, because it's the only data that we have imported, it's the only data that is in the QuickBooks file. This transactions are all going to automatically reconcile. So you're not going to go through a manual reconciliation process because you have pushed 100% of the bank data into QuickBooks, cash basis per se. So we'll go ahead and finish the reconciliation, and that would be a good way for you to at least be sure 100% that all the bank information is in QuickBooks. Now, we have an issue where the data hasn't been properly classified. This is the next step here where we're going to choose the correct income accounts, the correct expense accounts, etc. But what this technique is basically used for you to bring in 1,000 transactions in a matter of minutes. So our next step we're going to do is we're going to do another tool called Client Data Review Reclassify Transactions. This tool is also only available in the Accountant edition of QuickBooks. So what's really neat about this tool is I will start with the income, for example. I'll select the income category, and then basically 100% of the deposits we have put them into income. At this point, I can make decisions on whether or not all of these deposits are income. Some of them could be vendor refunds, some of them could be capital from the owner, etc. So what I can do is I can sort these by name, and based on the way they're sorted, at that point I can make a decision what type of transactions these are. Okay, I can also sort it by amount, and then based on the amount that could also have some other meaning. So I can see these numbers here, and I can say, well, I know that these 18,000 was actually capital from the owner, so I'll go ahead and just put capital in there or something like that, and I'll reclassify that one. That one's pretty easy. Some of these say online transfer, so we'll take a look at the ones that say online transfer. Certain banks call it transfer from, or certain banks call it online transfer. By looking at online transfers, I can see that there's another account involved. So for whatever reason, there's another account called BRC 2002. So I'm going to select those three, and then I'll create another account called BRC 2002. I'm not sure if that's an account or not, but either way, I'm going to classify it to some other type of balance sheet account. And then later on, as I do my research, I'll figure out if that is a bank account or a loan account or whatever that is. Let's look at that account, for example. Let's say that account happens to be the owner's personal account. So we'll select that account and we'll do shareholder distribution. And as we finish kind of going through these, we may just realize that everything else that's left in there, it's regular income, just regular straightforward cash basis income. So at that point, I don't really need to reclassify anymore. Income and deposits tend to be the easy ones, right? Because the only thing really we're looking for is making sure that none of this income is a capital contribution from the owner or something like that, which, for tax purposes, I have to be very careful not to classify that as income. So I'm going to go into expenses now. And obviously this is the big one, right? So I would have to go in there and look for patterns. So for example, all these ATM withdrawals, right? Let's say these are all supposed to be shareholder distribution. So I'll grab these four in one shot, put shareholder distribution, and click reclassify. Then I'll grab these Bank of America ones, for example, and let's say these are payments to a credit card. So then in here, I'll just go to BOA Visa and I'll create a credit card account. And again, as I work through my accounting here, I may realize that I may have to also bring in my credit card transactions and so forth. But what I'm trying to show you is a really fast, quick way to bring data into QuickBooks. And for example, there's a big one here called bank card discount. As we scroll down, we see there's a whole bunch in here. So whenever you have big ones like this, we can go up here where it says name and just type it, bank card discount, and that will filter them, which means I can just go down here and click on select all, and then I can reclassify all these to an account called merchant fees, for example, whatever the category that is supposed to be. So I click Reclassify. So as I go down the list here, um, I start reclassifying transactions. Pretty soon, let me go back here to all. Pretty soon, within not more than an hour or an hour, maybe an hour and a half, I can go through all of these, right? The ones that could probably take the longest are things like checks, because checks are likely to be, different payees and things like that. Those could take a little longer. However, everything else that's not a check, for example, Costco, like all these Costco, they're pretty self-explanatory here. So I'll just select all these Costco. I'll find out what they are. They're supposed to be office supplies, reclassify them, and the technique is a twofold technique. First is bring the data into QuickBooks, raw, reconcile the bank without really having to do any manual work, and lastly, use the batch reclassify to classify them correctly. And I just kind of want to show you the progress here. When I look at the profit and loss, now you start seeing how transactions start fitting into the correct categories. So like I said, it'll probably take you an hour or two at first, and then after a while, it will take you less than an hour to do thousands of transactions. I hope you enjoyed this technique. Thank you very much.